Good sign. So good to see you. Welcome. It was good yesterday, and welcome very much. And in the audience, welcome very much to Conversations. We have as a guest here a major person in terms of understanding alternative media, and also has been very actively engaged in many aspects of media, and also in the human justice movement, one might say, for a very long and distinguished career. It's an honor to welcome to the program the director or co-founder of the People Media's Collective. What is it called now?
It's the People's Media Center. I'm the founder of the People's Media Center.
Right.
Which I helped found with some members of the DC Indie Media and WBIX, which was WBI in exile at the time, an offshoot of the Pacifica campaign efforts, and with many good energy.
And this is Ryme Katkhouda.
Ryme Katkhouda. What they call me is Ryme Katkhouda. Ryme means white deer, and Katkhouda means governor in the name of God.
Wonderful, yeah. In what language is
that?
In
Arabic.
In Arabic.
My heritage.
Okay, that's a lead into this. You wear so many hats, and I'm so looking forward to the many things we'll be going to get, including artificial intelligence and other things. But could you share your background? Born and raised, educate a little bit, and then we'll talk about media and so forth.
I was born in Syria, and then we moved with my parents to Lebanon when I was 7.5 years old. When the uprising of the fishermen started in Lebanon, and then it became a whole series of militia warfare and what some people call the civil war.
What year would that have been?
74 it started.
74, okay.
A few years after, I started volunteering in the emergency room in Beirut. I was studying engineering at the time, electrical engineering and communication, and a minor in computer engineering.
Okay.
But I volunteered in the emergency room because I felt it's necessary to participate, and I do not partake into killing. I did not believe that this is what my calling was, so I figured I'll patch up the outcome of all of these fighting.
Healing rather than killing, yeah, right.
That's what I felt was my calling.
Yeah.
And also, I am an engineer, so I like to construct solutions. The solution of a time of war is to patch up the people and try to talk to the wounded warriors and their families to try to find a solution. In '82, when the Israeli invasion hit Lebanon, the wounded was much bigger numbers. The horror of the weaponry used made in the USA was beyond anything we had experienced before. And when you sit as a teen in a room with people that have wounds that keeps burning because it's phosphor bomb that was used, or they come
white phosphorus?
Phosphorus bombs, yes.
Yeah.
And when also they come in and they think they're fine because they're not wounded, and you look as by then a trained expert and you see a few drops of blood running by their ear, you know a vacuum bomb was used and they have cerebral hemorrhage.
Oh boy.
And you look at all of that and you say, what's the madness? Let us see. And then the Marines came to protect the U.S. Embassy.
Yeah, I remember.
And the way they carried themselves on the streets was like an occupying force.
That was under Reagan, right? Reagan.
It was under Reagan. Reagan, him being elected as leader of a so-called democracy in a world that claims to be free was very confusing to us back there.
It was confusing to many of us here also at the time, but go ahead. Yeah.
And it's like we were looking at a country that we studied in history to have had a civil rights movement, a labor movement, a women's movement. Even though your women took a long time to be allowed to vote, it still was shocking to see the Marines.
It took them longer in Switzerland. I think the women only got the vote in the 70s or something, which is really amazing that this world could have been so behind on that issue, isn't it?
Half the population disenfranchised, and then that's without even counting the African Americans and the indigenous that only in 73 were allowed to practice their own religions.
Voting rights act.
Some of them don't care to vote because they don't belong to the United States. They have their sovereign nations.
That's true.
So by then I was finishing my undergraduate engineering, and I had done good enough to be interested in proceeding, which is doing a master's in artificial intelligence, which was my choosing. I decided to come to United States.
That would have been what year?
This would have been in '83.
83, you're getting into artificial intelligence as your choice.
As my choice of a graduate work. I had done all my electives in cultural studies and history of art, and I wanted to come.
You mean as an undergraduate?
Yes.
And then you'd done your master's?
And I also worked with Dar al-Handasa, which is a consultancy,
But you were also doing engineering, and you were interested in electronics, so you have a really wide-ranging kind of thing. You're interested in not the least of which is artificial intelligence, a big field, no?
A big field. And at the time when I came in here to do my master's, I realized most of the jobs out of that were defense, and I refused to work for the U.S. Army. And actually...
Most of the jobs in artificial intelligence, you mean?
Yes.
You were doing academic training in that somewhere here in the States?
I was doing a master's.
Where?
Syracuse
that was
University.
upstate New York. Okay.
Yes.
Was it a good program and everything?
It was a good program, and the case center had just opened, and we were many in that field that actually were refusing to take defense money. We felt that if we allowed the defense money to subsidize our scholarships and our teaching assistantship and research assistantship, then we will be the pawns of a war machine. And many of us actually went into these fields to discover something that will save humanity.
Yeah, that's very interesting in and of itself, because the internet, as you would be well aware, being in the field, was developed from DARPA, and that was all defense intelligence and so forth. And the internet itself was developed by the defense. The leading edge of technological development, or research in technological development throughout history by political leaders, has been to gain some weapons advantage that gave them advantage geopolitically. It's a little hard, isn't it a little hard? I'm just asking. And it's a larger generic question to divorce yourself from certain aspects of an overall governmental system, which includes military research.
I believe,
it's hard to divorce the two, isn't it? Or is it?
I really believe that the way we perceive history as such is because too much of the mass media that's expensive is owned by these very same governments and army and actually corporate moguls and greeds that makes us remember that. The truth is technology has also invented a cure for HIV. It has also invented ways to clean water in a natural way. It has also invented people going beyond the boundaries of gravities and Earth. So we cannot sell short all the peace and the humanitarian inventions.
How do we divorce the two? The things that are given over to war making. On that end, you could go and model that we now have weapons that are species lethal, which is a big change after 200,000 years of human existence existentially. And on the other side, we have a tremendous liberating capability for the whole of the human society and the ecology that we also have at the level of capability. How is it that we divorce, or how do we deal with that two aspects of a dialectic?
It's a big question for the world to answer.
Yes,
I answered it in the route of my life by using my technological savvy to move on to doing media. I felt we needed to communicate. We needed to be history knowledgeable people. We needed to have a broader look than what is channeled by corporate greed, and to really build an independent media that's capable.
We're going to be doing programming tonight with some people at Columbia on the Monsanto Terminator Seeds greed. And also the whole nation is now coming into an election in the United States in 2012. And the thing is, you got on one side, you could be seeing a lot of these corporate market-oriented, I don't know, Friedman, maybe Chicago school kind of supply-side notions of economics and so forth, is still not answered in terms of the political realities of the world, is it?
I would consider these elections to be a distraction from what really matters, because at the end of the day, no matter who's in office, we have a bipartisan collection of scientists that tells the world and the government of the United States and its population, climate change is dangerous. We need to harness all of our knowledge to be able to save humanity and Earth and stop the destruction, and instead the U.S. population gets distracted every 4 years by an election that has 2 years lead and 2 years bleed. So,
okay, so you're upset with that?
I'm not upset. I am answering again the question of what can we do.
Right. No,
we can
I'm
understand
serious.
our capability better, and we can really step away from all of that, like I did from my Wall Street career.
Did you, when you wanted to get to Wall Street, you did a lot of work there and everything, but back to that issue of that, when you were doing that and you did not want to take a research grant or any contribution from the military-industrial complex that Mr. Eisenhower warned us against in 1950, 50s. How did that resolve itself? How did you deal with that?
We organized.
How can you divorce yourself from something that's so influenced, and now the market is so influenced by those very industries, that military-industrial complex?
We were on campuses,
yeah,
and there was also industry research, and the proof is I ended up finding a Wall Street firm, JIAC at the time, now Prolifix.com, that used artificial intelligence for user interface.
You took your degree in artificial. You managed to get through, even though you knew the thing was being financed by evil forces.
No, it wasn't.
How did you deal with the
I didn't take a research grant. I was a teaching assistant.
I see, right.
And my final project was a user interface. And then I found out of 335 applications to a job that I did, despite my background. On one hand, I did not have the green card at the time, so this was a handicap. On the second, I refused to work for defense. This was another handicap. But eventually, I found a company that was great enough for me to work with them 12 years.
And they understood all your background and your proclivity.
I told them in the interview.
Your political proclivity, yeah.
I told them in the interview something that would be crazy for a new graduate to say. They say, what is it you wouldn't do? I said, I wouldn't work for defense. And if I know that a system I'm working on is used for defense, I will destroy it.
Well, you should say if it was working only for defense, that would be one view of the human condition. Otherwise, it's offense.
No engagement.
Used for offense.
Call me a radical scientist. No engagement.
Because
it's too much of a slippery slope. It's too attractive. The power is concentrated in there. What we need instead is to go to Bolivia, is to study how the indigenous movements have dispersed power and then came to be governing a country in a different way.
I told you over coffee yesterday, we were together, that I had lived for a year and a half in Bolivia, up on the Altiplano among the Aymara Indian peoples. I lived among them, did a dissertation on the development of that civilization. It's very interesting. They had the IU, that was a way of land tenure and organization, communal and so forth. But we have lots of instances of that coming out of history, systems that we had in earlier periods of time. But time marches on, technology develops, we get the Gatling gun, which is an improvement over the musket. And again, back to the idea that Leonardo da Vinci was largely interested to the Medici, the political group, not because he could make beautiful paintings and beautiful art and all that, but because he could make a siege machine, something that would give them an advantage over another tribe. And that's still operative in the human scenario writ large. How do we live in such a world?
What do you remember of the Romans? They had armies. What do we remember of the Greeks? Their philosophy, their medicine, their art. Some people might say, wow, the Swiss people are so structured and their streets are so clean. They invented the cuckoo clock. The Italians, who seem much less organized, much less militarized, have invented so much more. And even the Swiss themselves don't want to engage in these different wars and armies, so it allowed them to be a mediator and also, of course, a laundry machine for
that's what I was going to say. They set up the system where all the people, the dictators and tyrants of the world, can hide all their money and not have any access to it by an illegal procedure. What I'm getting at, larger issue, how do we deal with that dialectic of death and destruction on one side, liberation, the whole march of history? How do we deal with it, and how do we deal with it in terms of media, which is also very much owned and operated by the same people who own all the capital assets?
With People's Media
Center.
Now,
what do you got? You got a People's Media Center. You've got a computer here. Why don't we say, maybe you can see, you're looking at it now, and you're thinking...
So we created People's Media Center.
Excuse me a second. Josh, maybe you can come in, if you can, on her camera. You can come on the computer that she has to her side, and she's demonstrating that. And so you might come in with the robo camera if you can, in terms of what's on the screen.
We create independent media like INN World Report.
Well, okay. Oh, INN, Lenny Charles.
LennyCharles.net, which is soon to go back on TV mid-June.
Okay, there we go. Now we got it. You can see the monitor. Look, Ryme, you can see the hold it up again, the graphic, okay, if you can. And then, okay, now hold that up and hold it for the camera, okay? And then the INN report, that's associated in my mind with my dear friend Lenny Charles.
Yes.
And they're down at Walker Theater here in New York, and you're associated with INN and Lenny.
Yes,
good
People's
guy,
Media Center is collaborating with INNWorldReport.net
okay, good.
on their headline news, which is 3 times a day, on their website, but also on getting the place ready for going back on the air as a half-hour TV show every day, Monday to Friday.
There's something, Bridges or something?
Yes, they're going to be on the Bridges Network, among
Bridges
others.
Is a
and
new
hopefully
thing beyond
on MNN.
Free Speech TV and so forth. They're satellite delivered. They have Amy and they have Laura Flanders and other
And
things.
they have much more than these 2 stars. The other way to save humanity is to stop concentrating on the stars and really pay attention to the details of the people and have an open mind to sift through experiences and businesses and productions and inventions and have a process to synthesize collectively what can move us ahead.
That would be, if I may, Ryme, let me say, that would be to have intelligent television would be a good thing, and multimedia is becoming more and more the way of having access to the store of human knowledge, education, and so forth. But if you look at the television industry, which I guess you have had some acquaintance with, I don't think they're. If you say you're trying to look away from the stars, if you look at it, that's all they're looking for are stars. They don't care. If I may suggest, I'm talking about the industry. I'm talking about the industry. They're not caring about anything other than stars that will give them an advantage in terms of the readings of Arbitron and other things, that there are more people watching so that their ads will be more valuable to sell cornflakes rather than Wheaties, and that's the only thing that motivates them in terms of...
But the people turn to Facebook. People turn to Facebook.
No, that's getting into a different realm than television. I was talking about television.
I'm talking about media.
Okay.
See, to be stuck to the fact that television is a way of delivery is passé. We have the internet and we still have the street flyering.
Yeah.
And yes, we cannot... Flyering.
Oh, yeah, flyers.
And the arm length organizing.
Yes, right.
And talking to each other. So there is all of that needs to be safeguarded. We need to take a much bigger role as intellectuals to speak with the masses and to be independent. For instance, INN, from any corporate money, they're creating their own restaurant.
That's right. They're supposed to open May 5th.
May 5th, Epifanio at 56 Walker Street. That's one way to be financially independent. I hope the camera can come close enough to see. It's going to be Mexican food.
I understand they're going to have a lot of greasy food that's really like they're going to.
I don't think greasy. It's going to be local markets. It's going to be vegetarian tasting, amazing.
Yeah.
And it's going to be making a difference.
Yeah, and then you're also tied into this radio station. You've been involved with that. It's down in Washington now.
It's a part of Pacifica. It's one of the stations.
It's one of the stations of Pacifica?
Correct.
There's still 5?
It's WPFW.org. Every Tuesday morning at 11 in the morning Eastern Time, I am the executive producer of Voices with Vision.
Yes.
I co-host it with a group of people that I have trained. That's the DC Radio Co-op. We also have another show, which is Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. with the Latino Media Collective, because short of radicalizing and enabling Spanish-speaking population to be telling the story, it would be hard to really shift the paradigm of how the story is told.
What differentiates the traditional means of communication that came through radio, television, and then websites and computer, and then finally the internet?
It's less
from
expensive.
The large. Why is it the new media? Let's say
it's much less expensive.
Okay.
It has a much broader reach than what traditional broadcasting is, and it's non-regional. It's global, and this matters for a techno-capable world. On the other hand, it enables communication that then people are walking it to places that don't have the internet. They connect with each other by internet. Let's say indigenous people have some of the most advanced communication means electronically in the United States.
Seems everything's moving to the cell phone.
That's one way.
The enhanced cell phone or the advanced. There's a big difference between a run-of-the-mill cell phone and an advanced cell phone. And there's a law of Kurzweil has a law of accelerating returns, or it could be doing more with less, or exponential increasing of capability of the technology writ large, which gives opportunities which weren't available to us historically.
We totally are. Actually, our second project...
Now, you're showing something on your computer. Do you want the camera to try to come in on that?
I would like that.
Okay,
I would
Josh,
like
if
that.
you can, do you see the little camera screen? I mean, the little computer screen. If you can, there you go. He's coming into it now, so you can talk to it, Ryme, okay?
See, this is one of the second projects.
She's got at the top, Josh. She's got a little thing.
It's all good.
Yeah, okay, there you go.
So News Tips is a new invention that we are creating with IMEMC.org.
What is that, a company?
It's International Middle East Information Center.
Okay.
And it's a collective news making that was created with Palestinians and Israelis, with Europeans, with Latinos, with people from the United States that were frustrated that the story about what goes on in the ground in Palestine and occupied Palestine is not told. And what we have created here is a $250,000 invention that would allow people, citizen journalism from mobile phone, to actually text a tip in Arabic, in English, or in Arabizi. Now, it's news, ti.ps.
Is it something akin to Twitter or something like that? Or does
it's a mobile phone texting.
Mobile phone texting. Right.
We will also take Twitter input, and then we verify it, we translate it, we verify it against a lot of different databases to just say that the parameters of the tip makes sense.
It's correct, yeah. That's like fact-checking.
It's fact-checking.
Against a database that has facts lined up in a certain way as opposed to what the system has.
Correct.
Their facts lined up.
Correct. Right. And it also cross-checks different tips, and then it brings it to a trained reporter.
Does that autonomically?
Automatically.
Automatically or autonomic?
It's semi-automatically.
It's done in rapid order because it can be done with algorithms.
Right.
Stuff. Okay.
But then a reporter looks at it and calls back.
A human being?
A human being.
Okay.
And then they call the person to do even deeper fact-checking, calls other sources, and when the story is validated, it's breaking news on our wire, which is IMEMC.org.
And it's been fact-checked and made, so it's, that's the same, that's a journalistic procedure the New York Times would follow, or attempt to, try to have it fact-checked.
Some of these outfits already have asked us if we would separate the modules from our application. We're also working with Medan, which is an amazing site that allows translation.
They're not going to be able to get in on the fine details. Oh, they are. They're coming in.
Between Arabic and English, where you can post an article and translate it.
Can you use the translating between Arabic and English through Google Translation, or how is it done? Can it be done autonomically?
It's done automatically, and it's also crowdsourced.
It's done, the print. It's print. The print is done that way, not the voice or the audio.
Both.
Both?
Both. We are converting the voice to a text. We are translating the text automatically on an expert system in artificial intelligence.
Right.
It learns, so it's better every time.
So you have to go through the text. We still have to go through the text to try and get a translation of languages one to the other.
Correct, but we also have to go through human being, because all of this is posted, and then we say it's crowdsourced, which means it's posted in a place, Medan namely, and then human being look at it, and then they fix whatever the machine couldn't translate properly.
Why don't the human beings get in the way of things in a way? I mean, or is that the trend that it's more and more? I see at least 50% of the trades done on Wall Street are now autonomic. That is, it's all
I helped code some of these systems.
It's all written into the parameters of the program, and so they make decisions. And then also, let me ask you something, because it's AI, but it's all kind of related and everything. I've heard tell from people that airlines, we have airlines like Delta Air and Swiss Air and all that, and that they would be more efficient. And you're getting a lot now. People are going to sleep, air controllers and everything. They would be more efficient and, above all, safer if there were no pilots in the cockpit.
I disagree with that.
Okay, now wait a minute.
As an engineer, I disagree with that.
Triple redundancy. Triple redundancy, it's a metaphor. Triple redundancy would be far safer in terms of having the things worked out with very careful, than having a human being that brings with it human error. But in terms of the overall use of our technological developments, do you think that's something that may be in the wind?
I know that there are some Karens, since I was in college and then in the industry for 12th Street, that believed in that. The truth is also human beings bring creativity. Automation works very well in repeating an already done deal.
Right.
It also has a certain extrapolation from that is good in what we call crowdsourced checking. But
Right.
what it fails is creativity.
Okay, wait.
In
okay.
Arabic, we have a joke that says,
that could be part of creativity. Well, okay, the plane crashed, it was human error. That
but
could be called
creativity
creative
means
because
also
they're
coming
testing-
out with unexpected solutions
in an unexpected solution.
circumstances.
All right, but an unexpected solution in the landing of a giant aircraft with 500 people on it is an unexpected solution would be it crashed. And it is not done according to the Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
It's not that often, though, that the airplanes are crashing because of the pilots.
No,
More
it's
often than not,
No.
it's failure of the machine.
No. It is not. Oh, machinery
Yes.
writ large. Okay, that's true. But it's also this idea.
Frozen wings.
I'm trying to get to the metaphor, right? And the thing is there. The bigger issue would be rather than airline, it would be, let's say, the operation of Spaceship Earth. We have a spaceship Earth. We're all interconnected. It's all one system. We're all interconnected with everything else. And we now have Promethean, brand new, existential new capability, and the distinguishing from intellectual functioning from the animals, which has been what we've been concerned with, to distinguish ourselves from that, it's now being shifted over to where we're distinguishing our historical pattern to the technological-oriented future. And now we have a thing where, on a large scale, we got two things. We got that extension of consciousness, which brings new power, new understanding, creativity. Mr. Einstein, in 1905, discovered special theory of relativity, opened up a Pandora's box of atomic weapons. Mr. Teller opened up a box of hydrogen weapons. They've got new things, and those weapon systems are now species lethal.
But also
Do you
some
hear?
of the relativity of theory and science of Mr. Einstein has allowed us to do microbiotics, which has saved many lives. We also have a 13-year-old today that is challenging Einstein's theory. What people forget is automation does not carry infinity. It has maybe more preciseness than a human being because it synthesizes the experience of many human beings
Right.
and beyond, but it doesn't forge forward. For it only can repeat, reiterate, and self-learn. And it has bugs. While infinity, in my opinion and my
Not only
experience,
reiterate, it can create...
infinity only happens in nature, and we are part of nature.
Infinity is like saying you got some fundamentalist, something like the religions have some idea of the way the universe, they have a God or something they talk about, and they have a way. The universe is synergetic. Its behavior systems unpredicted. There is uncertainty in the universe.
Exactly.
And even if we get to a point where, after 200,000 years of our existence on this planet, we get to a point where we are able to, let's say, rather than be enslaved, as most of humanity is now within the historical paradigm, like serfs on a feudal estate, and so if we get to a liberated order of everybody can do in a way that they can maximize their own participation and synergistic resonancy, we will be able to transcend what's been 200,000 years of human experience, coming to the end of the human experience. Liberation, a new relationship to the cosmos. It's never mentioned.
But at the same time, there are indigenous ways that are better learned. When the tsunami hit Indonesia and all of these absolutely horrible East Asian countries, the animals and the indigenous went up. And very few of them were hit as hard as all of these automated urban hubs. There is still knowledge in this space of infinity, in this unsolved, that is hope, that carries much more than what we can create from our extremely limited background. My mother is a Hallaj.
What's a Hallaj?
Hallaj are Sufis.
Sufi.
And in the Sufi mythology...
Are they the ones who do the whirling dervish?
And one of the sects does that as an appetizer.
It's very colorful.
Yes, to an uninitiated eye, an outsider, a looker,
to a tourist,
on. But when you are living it, what happens is you transcend the here.
Yeah.
You are expected to connect the past to the present, the infinite to the local. But that's not why I was mentioning it. Why I was mentioning it is in their philosophy, there is this concept that we will never light up a room fully. So their windows, if you look at their castles, is just trying to shed light and accepting the fact that our knowledge is finite. You're going to shed light only, as opposed to the ambition to illuminating everything, and sometimes the rest is in the shadow.
Okay, well, that's
they teach philosophy of Sufism in the Ismaili castles, which are carved in the mountain. You walk in the space and you know. I went to Syria. I visited that. And when you experience such things, when you come from a background that's beyond the pragmatic and the constructed, and that is trying to understand the beyond, what our knowledge as we carry it today is, you definitely still need humanity.
All right, well and good. Humanity is part of an evolutionary process. We're coming to understand more and more all the time, and being able to understand things intelligently rather than, we've had a self-reflective consciousness, I guess, since we appeared. We would have had to be concerned with issues like what's it all about, that a crocodile probably does not consider in terms of part of the evolution. We get to a point of qualitative transformation. For instance, we were contained in Australopithecine times 4.47 million years ago in Australopithecine. There were no human beings. There was no human consciousness. There was a development of a consciousness thing. Then we get to Homo habilis, and then we appeared 200,000 years ago. So we appear within a larger evolution of consciousness, and the point I'm trying to make is we may be not, that would be like being in a birth canal or a time thing where time is changing. It's an anti-entropic function in universe, bringing perhaps increased pattern, and we may be not, we're now in a time of that evolutionary process. After 10,000 generations, this is the defining generation. That's the point we're trying to make. It's not like the 6th century.
And there have been ones before. Sometimes we might overshoot and we need to go back, and that's where Sankofa comes. You know, the Sankofa in Yoruba. It means it's not taboo to look back, to move forward.
I don't know from that. I don't know. It's a philosophy.
What it means, it's a philosophy, but also it's a practice that you need to forge ahead. But from time to time, if you feel that you don't have what it takes to move forward, look back. You might have forgotten something. And for instance, when Israel was celebrating its birth, the Palestinians wanted to remember what has happened to their land and the occupation. So they, a group of us producers all over the world decided that what we should do is we should do the Nakba, 18 years of dispossession, and talking from 60 years of dispossession, 18 hours.
Yeah.
What happened from a Palestinian perspective. And at Pacifica, I was the executive producer of 1 hour that aggregated the work of 14 producers and 11 artists. And I called it Sankofa of the Nakba. We're looking back to move forward. If we chaperone Israel as the solution to the region, we are even cutting even the Jewish people themselves. Because when we create an artificial little country that any European who's too racist to accept Jewish people in their land and welcome them as natives can tell them, go to Israel, it doesn't serve Jewish people in the world. So I did that, and I was thankful.
That's not the way the Zionists would see it. They say they're having liberation and they've got historical chapter and verse and everything like that. It's their land, not yours. And that was the Europeans had that kind of a thing for imperialism, and that's the history of the world. Exactly. And whoever's got the Gatling gun and the ability to coerce the other people, they win. And they're the ones who are the conquerors of the West. I don't know if they win.
They seem there, like the Romans over the Greeks.
Well, the Romans were there for 1,000 years with their empire, darling.
But we remember so much more of the Greek philosophy, and that's what has nurtured a lot of how we construct ourselves. So I don't know who's the winner. The idea is for humanity to be more texturized than this dialectic.
Texture.
The ones on top and the one in the back. There's a whole spectrum.
Well, the point I was trying to... The point is, why would there be any reason, listen, if I may, why would there be any reason in this time, this is what, 2011 of the Christian era as they measure it, right? And everything. Why would there be any possibility for there to be a universally just system and everything, or anything like that, when there never has been? What is different? What is different?
You don't know that it has never. The story, as was told to you, is that of the victorious.
Always they write the history. They've written all the history. The victors write the history.
Not all of it.
The slaves don't write the history.
We are still looking at what the Mayans have left behind. And I have given my life to make sure the story of the people and what works is there, and that best lessons are shared and are preserved. And there are many people like
Howard Zinn wrote a good book, The People's History of that, but also James Joyce, probably the leading reader of the implications of technology as part of the evolutionary process with the wake and Ulysses, said history is a nightmare, and I'd add, of injustice from which we're attempting to awaken. But history has always been unjust in terms of a collective liberation of everybody, because that has had to await the point where we get to the possibility of having a technologically augmented capability to allow a liberation that was not possible within a condition that's fundamentally being transformed in our very time, our lifetime.
There have been liberations that were successful because they didn't try to break through, they reinvented and they created. And it is important to continue harnessing technology.
What have you got there? You're showing something now.
What I am trying to show is the outcome of that story.
That thing of Nakba.
It's Sankofa of the Nakba.
And are you going to play something?
I would like to play
She's going to play something, I guess, on the computer that is audio, because she's in radio.
And this aired on 18 radio stations across the world. It's
and you
called
want to play it? How long is it?
We're going to only play like less than 40 seconds of it, because it's a 1 hour.
Okay, let's pick it up on the computer from her playing. Go ahead, hit it. Hit it, girl.
The veteran refugee says it's been 60 years.
2008 is the 60th anniversary of the catastrophe.
It happened in Palestine.
That's when Israel forced nearly 1 million Palestinians out of their homes, massacred hundreds of Palestinians, destroyed hundreds of their villages and towns, and declared the creation of the State of Israel.
So Israel is there, and I'm here carrying a Palestinian flag.
So this coming week is going to be a celebration of Palestinian existence, a commemoration of the catastrophe that we have been through as a people, and to proclaim loudly, no celebration for apartheid. Palestinian refugees will return.
This micro 1-hour documentary special, produced by the Pacifica Radio Network, is a Sankofa, looking back so we can move forward to mark 60 years of dispossession on the 60th anniversary of
Al-Nakba, Arabic word for the catastrophe.
Today, we are celebrating the existence and the continuation of the Palestinian people to prove that they are the owner of the land.
Mixing speeches, interviews, songs and spoken word, survivors' testimonies from Palestine and the diaspora, discussing contemporary advancement projects in Palestine and around the world. It looks at the Nakba in its regional context and reflects on its impact, shaping the current geopolitics of the region.
The Nakba is a colonizing process. It was armed by the British.
The paramilitary Zionist forces cleansed the land of its indigenous Palestinians.
Even before Israel declared itself a state, it had an army, it had a navy, it had an air force.
They claimed that the Arabs wanted to throw them in the sea, but they threw us in the desert.
Today, we are celebrating the existence and the continuation of the Palestinian people to prove that they are the owner of the land.
Okay, there's a study. That's really interesting, yeah.
And so, by their very existence, they won. They won against Western forces of the world.
Who's won?
The Palestinians.
How can you say the Palestinians have won?
They're here.
They're there, yeah,
They're
but how can
here
you say...
despite all these forces trying to obliterate them. And so
How can you say they won?
Because if
the Israelis are doing whatever they want in the West Bank. It's occupied.
They're not doing whatever they want. Because what they want...
Well, they're building more settlements every day.
And they're building a wall, and
they've got the wall, and they've got atomic bombs, and they've got jets, and they've got unlimited support. They're a superpower.
And they have done a genocide on Gaza. Even some of the colonel, like the Colonel Jonathan of the Israeli Defense Force, called it crimes of war. But despite all of that, they're not doing what they want. The Palestinians are here. So when we are understanding...
Palestinians are where?
They are alive.
Oh, they're alive.
In the diaspora
Well, okay,
and in
let
the
me
land.
give you another example, if I may, out of history, my darling, okay, there was a mighty continent, and we had many indigenous people here in the Western Hemisphere, and then there came another Nakba 500 years ago called Columbus, and the Europeans came in great mass, and the Europeans came with advanced technology. They had rifles rather than bow and arrows, and they conquered, and they stole, and they took, and they violated every treaty of the indigenous people here, both in North and Southern Hemisphere. They enslaved people, brought them out of Africa, and they're here, and so forth, and they've won. And the ones who are running the world are people who were built upon injustice and slaving.
They didn't
and
win,
everything.
they ruled.
And the whole of history is nothing more than the people who have
If
you have the Gatling gun and they have the musket, you win. You can coerce them, you can conquer them, and that's the history of the world.
And you can rule, but you do not win. Because the indigenous are here, they're connecting with each other internationally. The American Indian movement has something to do with Gaddafi, had something to do with Bolivia, had something to do with Venezuela, and they are nurturing a way that, again, going back to Indonesia, saved them and might save humanity.
Back to Indonesia.
The tsunami that I talked about, and the fact that the indigenous knew to rise up.
We
might need to go back to their ways to survive, because we are sitting on a continent that has dried up and contaminated so many of its rivers, that has cut its mountains like a raw, horrific wounds that we might have a hell of a problem overcoming, that has ruined so much of its water resources that they're going to import water from somewhere else, and hopefully we won't have to import air from somewhere else because we're contaminating it so much. So I wouldn't say that this is a victory, and this is why.
You think that the solutions are going to be found in the old indigenous ways?
Or does history move
forward? Does history move forward? I mean, we could have still been back in the 6th century. It took 200 years to invent a tack. Things are moving, call it. Things are moving. Is it bad?
Forward.
Is it bad that we have a consciousness where we can make technology, that we can make automobiles? We can make. Should we not make automobiles? Should we stay in the horse and buggy? Should we be back on a canoe?
Instead of a nuclear weapon and so much money going into it, we should actually perfect our automobile so it doesn't have such an exhaust system. And we did with the buses. They're running on electrical. We should perfect the efficiency of our energy, but also lift up our population to consume less. So what we need is something that...
Consume less than they do? You're going to tell that to somebody whose kids are starving? Don't eat one piece of bread, eat only a quarter of a piece of bread?
That's not the people I want to talk
Well, that's what you're telling the starving people to eat less?
Absolutely not.
Why are you telling them to eat less?
That's not who I'm talking to.
Why don't you tell them that instead of having bread, you should have a pound cake?
Absolutely.
You should have...
pound cake is not so good for you. But you should have a varied meal, and it should be healthy. It should be brought from local markets, organic. But that's not what I'm saying. Don't consume.
What's wrong with organics? Is there something wonderful in Mother Nature, or something organic is wonderful, and everything mankind does by extension is bad?
No, there is no bad and good. There is a whole spectrum. And we need to be open enough to sample from it. I am telling, don't consume, or don't over-consume to a population, and mostly corporations, and which are the most expensive polluters of the world.
And you notice they have all the money, and they have all the ownership, and they have all the assets, and they have all the power. And they can buy the Congress. They have all the power.
By barter, and their dollar
What good
is
is it
dropping.
going to do for people who want to be good?
We can barter so that we actually disperse the power of the dollar. And that's what our story as alternative media people have to do.
You think so, right?
I absolutely believe so.
I disagree
I am
with
putting
you.
my life to it.
I just want to get it. Gaddafi and everything. I think I disagree. I think the progressive community is the biggest problem. The intellectuals are the biggest problem. And I think it's on this idea that somehow technology, because it's been so badly developed, and it's used for war making and conquer, and that's the history of humanity by and large. They have a nation because, again, what gives them the power to coerce India is the Gatling gun. They had an advantage. or the dreadnought, or the tank, or whatever. We can fight. That's what history's been about. You can do that. And because it's been so badly used, somehow we got to brief against the idea of technology. I don't think that's a very appropriate thing. I think what we have to do is bring the technology to where it can be beneficial to everybody. Yes. And you know who's in blame? The left wing. The progressives are in blame because they think, no, listen, the technology is increasingly a matter, it's going from where the input to production, you have, let's say, a piece of machinery or something. You go back 1776, there was very little anything other than labor that went into producing something. 12 hours to make a pair of beautiful boots, but it took 12 hours. Handicraft, Duncan Fife furniture, all this. But there was no manufacturing, there was no mass production, there was no algorithms, there was none of these things. Now, the whole trend is going from where 90% of the production was labor. It's now down to where the labor in the trend in the United States and in the world is for the production. Those algorithms on Wall Street, those technological extensions are what's producing wealth and automation. And the technology is producing the wealth, and the labor input to production is moving to the vanishing point in terms of the actual production that's going in the trend.
It's producing material wealth.
Right, material wealth is called, material wealth is finance, and material wealth is bread, milk, sugar, food, education, everything else, because that's the way the distribution is being done. And it's the left wing that says, it's perfectly all right for all the capital assets to be owned by a tiny plutocratic class. In our country, it's getting absurd. 1/100th of 1% own all the assets. They sit there, they get richer as they sleep because they own private property assets that are theirs that give them more money all the time. It's all right. They can have all that ownership. They get all that money and the concentration because they're linked to the way things are actually being produced. And we're going to become barterers.
Yes.
Of organic food, we're going to grow a little thing against them.
Yes, and we're going to add this. I think that.
Why? Why allow a capital formation or a system where all the assets are benefiting those who are already rich? They get more and more all the time.
No, we're not.
And you're so objecting to the idea of having the capital assets distributed democratically to everybody.
I'm not.
Well,
by
they seem to
bartering,
be.
Because I didn't finish
because
my
they,
thought,
they
Mr.
accept.
Shaller, because I didn't finish
I'm through.
my thought.
I'm through. They accept the idea that the only way to distribute income to the masses, the serfs, us, is through labor. You have to have a job doing something on their estate. Why do we accept that we form capital in a way rather than democratically distributing ownership? That's a bad word in the progressive community. That's a bad word. That's an evil word. Ownership is bad.
That's an ignorant
and
objection.
That is a problem. That's
of such a distribution.
That's what's standing in the way of the progress of the human society.
There's also the greed of those that hold all of these goods. And by starting to barter and by dispersing power, you will have you will have the workers bartering their skills, and you will have people reconstructing things so that you will no longer have a working force. You will forced to have partners, no longer wage earners.
Wait a minute. Partners in what sense does that mean? If I may.
I can give you an example.
Okay.
In one city, I forgot where, United States, the government of the United States tried to say, you cannot create a bartering system because we need to tax you. And this is illegal. And then the place said, no, why don't you participate? And then you force the power when there is no longer soldiers, they cannot be chiefs. So you force them to align with what you have created, so you disperse their power. You include in the concept of wealth your human relations, your knowing your neighbors, your relation to earth, to the sky, to an environment that you are not piercing with pollutants. And you proceed with scientific research. Most of the scientific
research is all bought off by the people with all the money.
But they're all paid it's all paid for by the corporations that have all the money. After fact.
They're all just serfs on a feudal estate. They set the parameters. Even the scientific community.
Our role is to shift that paradigm.
No, the scientific community is being now, Lynn Margulis, our leading biologist, is actually bringing questions that the scientific process is being violated. You can't trust it because it's being politicized for economic gain by the people who are overwhelmingly powerful.
So we go and we develop something else, a different way of communication.
So what's a different way?
More...
Okay, you're going to say to me, okay, I said to you something. Let me just ask you, all right? The idea, I could show you a chart. There would be a chart. It's a graph. That in the United States, and that's a trend for the world. It's not, the world is a lot varied. But Tom Jefferson's time, you'd have a chart. You'd have people, labor participation, and other than labor, resources, technology, that sort of thing. Okay, 90% was labor. Okay, coming out of feudalism. Okay, labor. Okay,
yes,
and that's what the worker has, labor. Okay, and 10% was technology. And then it goes, and then the trend goes, I said the trend goes like this in the United States in terms of the ratio between those two inputs to production. And it goes now, there are projections of it, to where it's only about 10% of the production has anything to do with human labor. Understand? Let it sink in. 90% of the production is being done by technological instruments. And the trend is toward automation where producing things like automobiles, television sets, computers, all these things that have no intrinsic value. It's just a manufacturing process. It's just a thing. It's got nothing to do with human value or anything like that. It's just the way things can be produced. No wonder the capitalists are being ripped off. It's their technological instruments that are producing the wealth, and they go and they make these taxes in order to have to distribute income to the people so they can buy whatever the machines are making because they have no ownership. They're not related to the way things are being produced.
So I'm not saying that it's bad that only 10% is a human. The human can think. They can develop different things.
No, listen.
And the outcome of that should be distributed. The wealth, the making.
How?
Revolutions toppling the system as we know it.
Why not?
Dispersing power.
How? In what way?
Masses.
How?
Masses.
No, how are you going to why not?
Mass education.
Okay, listen to me.
And also education in non-academic settings.
In what?
In non-academic settings.
No, let's talk about things like housing, television sets, automobiles, good electric automobile, all this thing. Demand, it's called in economics, okay?
Correct.
How are the people, if 90% of the population is contributing by their labor to production, only 10% of the actual production, there's something askew.
Yes.
Why is it so wrong, or why does the left, the progressives, somehow think they want to keep the brief against private property? That private property, stock ownership, bonds and so forth, are held by a tiny plutocratic class. They own it all.
That's what's wrong.
They have to pay a lot of taxes.
That's what's wrong.
No, that's not. No.
It needs to be owned by everybody.
Well, then wait a minute. In Mondragor, in Spain, they have a cooperative, and they own the company. They own. Yes. Is there something? The left seems to think owning a piece of property, a stock, a piece of paper, a stock, brings money to you because you own the machine that's making the production. Why keep it not? It has to become democratized to everybody.
Absolutely.
The ownership.
And like you
private property ownership.
Absolutely.
Now, is that something you can go along with your bartering?
Absolutely.
How?
Absolutely, because you own it by reabsorbing it.
Yeah, but we don't have anything on the left. The progressives
I do not consider myself left or right or beyond.
Okay.
I am a journalist who questions everybody. Sometimes my question alienates the so-called progressive in this country more because I question, like you are doing, the very construct of what they're coming from.
So what we should be doing is having systems by which the capital is formed in a way where the ownership of the capital instruments that are going to be used in the creation of capital-intensive, productive, automated systems is done democratically to everybody. Only country in the world that tried to do that was Libya.
Yes, under Gaddafi.
We, in the intellectual community, I don't know what's left in the right of any intellectual. It's all intellectual community usually is the left. They're concerned with the least among us. They're not concerned with the advanced. Do you know what I'm saying? The left is blinkered. The progressive community is blinkered.
So what is our role as media makers? Is to tell that story.
To tell the
is
story
to
that the
study
progressive community...
to study our knowledge as a humanity, to go somewhere else and bring the story, to cross-pollinate experiences, and to come up with something that we bring back to the masses in mediums that aren't controlled by the few, hence the internet for now and the streets.
With all due respect, I think you need to have a system because you don't expect a tiger not to eat an antelope.
Exactly.
A banker, a politician, they're not the ones. It's
unless
the intellectual.
Unless they're fed.
No.
When a lion is fed, he goes to sleep.
Yeah, right.
So you don't kill your lions.
Woody Allen said the lion will lay down with the lamb, and the lamb will get very little sleep. You know. But
there is something in nature that's a really cute story that's real, even though that sometimes National Geographic is still carrying the imperialist look on and the cuteness of their colonial analysis of what happens, they bring you some good stories.
Yeah.
One of them is actually in some of the Amazon forest, there's a tree that bears fruits, and when that fruit ferments, animals who eat it get drunk.
Oh, no kidding!
Animals know that.
God, I'd want the rights to the film of them being
so you see them coming in the season when it's ready. They sit under the tree, and the lion and the elephant and everybody's sitting together, and they wait. When the fruits come, everybody eats it because there's so much fruits, all of them can feed.
Let's party.
And then they all get drunk, and then they party. If people had more sex in Washington, D.C., they'll be having less war ideas.
Yeah.
Is that shocking to some people that are prudish and in the background that is tunnel vision? But when you come back, I'm going back to nature. Have more and prosper. Feed the lion. They'll leave the lamb alone.
The lion's being fed.
Acknowledge.
The lion's being fed very well and everything. But with all due respect, the intellectual community, they have to have a way of hoisting, in the interest of surviving and liberating the whole planet and the ecology, they have to be able to hoist the system from the right on its own petard of private property ownership. They have to go, instead of saying, it's perfectly all right for you few people to own everything, we'll all do whatever you say, we're on your estate, massa, we'll do what you say, and that kind of thing, and question that in the name of, there's the thing, binary economics, and the only country in the that's Kelso, he wrote a book called The Capitalist Manifesto with Mortimer Adler. You got to form capital in a way where ownership goes to everybody, because the technology is going to displace people in the mundane production of mass-produced things. They're going to have a way to clear the market. They're going to have money to buy what can be produced. That you need. You're going to have to hoist the system on its own. And the left is not doing that.
If you own it, you don't pay for it. The owner of the factory don't pay for their plastic cans. They just get them.
You're getting into a small detail of what's a big picture. I'm suggesting. Only country in the world. In Libya, you could start a business. They distributed socially a lot of housing and education and all those things socially through the wealth and everything. And if you had a business in Libya, I mean, what I'm critiquing is the labor theory of value that is the basis of so much of Marx. And it gave value to getting a minimum wage and getting unions and all that kind of thing.
And being attached to having a job as a way to lift yourself to an acceptable social behavior.
No, and that's the way you get money, by being a good slave, a wage slave. And we can't accept that. And you don't let them say that that's the only way to distribute demand. Okay, and the only country in the world did it was Libya. If you had private sector, you could not hire anybody. They had to be owners of the capital base of the company. Okay, the owner, Consolidated Edison, should be owned by the people who buy electricity. They should be owned the asset. And that's something the community of the progressive community has to address in order to hoist it on its system.
If we don't tell them that story?
Well, we have to get the story out, but we're now running out of time. We're trying.
I would like to tell one more story.
I'm sorry. We've run out of time. It's been the time. So thanks a lot for coming in. We got to keep working on this thing of trying to bring things about. And thank you very much for viewing. This is Ryme Katkhouda.
Ryme Katkhouda.
Katkhouda. And she's the co-founder of the People's Media Centers. You can see, Ryme, thanks a lot. It's the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
And I hope everybody comes to our restaurant so we can monetize our energy.
Good, nutritious, vegetarian food.
5th of May, 56 Walker. It doesn't taste vegetarian. It tastes like delicious Mexican food. 56
Vegetarian
Walker.
can taste good. Right? That's another thing. That's good. Thanks a lot for coming in. Great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. We're coming back again tomorrow. That's it. And thanks again. This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship.
See you soon, New York.
Okay. Bye-bye.